Willpower is great until it isn't. If you want to make change last, you need a plan, you need strategy. Michael Lopez is the man with the plan. He's a transformational specialist and he's worked with everyone from Meta to DoorDash. His new book is called Change: Six Science Backed Strategies to Transform Your Brain, Body, and Behavior. He'll show you how to go farther, faster, no matter what your goal is. I'm Deirdre Fitzpatrick. You can download and take Dying to Ask on the go on Apple or Spotify, or you can watch my conversation with Michael Lopez right here. Michael Lopez, welcome to the Dying to Ask podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So your LinkedIn bio lists you as a transformational specialist, which I'm guessing does not mean fairy godfather. There's some work involved. What exactly is that?
Yeah, I mean, the simplest description is I help people change. I help people, teams, organizations change, and that can come from a number of different triggers. You know, at the company level, it's about maybe a technology or culture or new strategy. At the team level, it's about being effective, getting performance, having a group of people work together to achieve a goal. And, you know, individually, we all have goals of different types in our lives. And you know, over the years, I've just sort of built a system that I believe in and that I think has worked and tried to lean into that as part of helping people achieve what they want to do in life.
This may sound like a silly question, but why is change so hard that we have to bring someone like you into a company to help people do it?
Oh yeah. Well, that's why I wrote a book about it. So I'll try to summarize
Yeah.
the sort of the simple parts. I think the first is, you know, really understanding what goes on between your ears in this thing called our brain that sits inside of a black box that only knows the experience that you have. And, you know, we know more about the brain than at any point in our history. And so understanding the brain's limitations, the stories that you've experienced, that you tell yourself, the narratives that we build, they become powerful forces to either unleash us or hold us back. And I think that's the first thing. You know, the second thing I'd say is that learning, particularly as we get older, it changes, and a lot of people don't understand that experience and then become uncomfortable with the stress of learning something new, right? You hear the phrase, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, it's not true, but it changes. And so for most people, that's intensely uncomfortable. And I'd say the third thing is, you know, change is hard in the sense that it's stressful. And most people don't like that experience of stress. And there's levels to it. We'll talk about it. But those are three big things that make change really, really difficult.
Your new book is called Change: Six Science Backed Strategies to Transform Your Brain, Body, and Behavior. I love when science proves stuff. And I love that it can prove stuff as simple as why I say I'm going to do something and then I don't.
Right.
Why does
So
that work? Why is it so important to understand the why and how that all connects?
well, you know, habits. Let's start with this idea of habits, and you know, James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, is
Yeah.
sort of the Bible of this conversation. And I draw on a lot of his research and a lot of his writing in my own book. You know, habits serve a very important sort of reason in our lives, right? Which is I can't get up every day and think about everything that I need to do, right? There's some stuff that just needs to be on autopilot, and we could go into the idea of homeostasis and why that all matters for keeping us alive and all of that, and that's all true. But the idea that habits are really important. The challenge with habits is many of our habits creep in ways that we don't see and that we're not aware of until they become counterproductive in some way in our life. And
Okay, so
that's
give me
this.
let's just pause for a sec. Give me an example of that.
Well, you know, I think maybe diet nutrition is a great example, right? You know, eating the donut one time doesn't do anything to you, right? But it's the repeating of that behavior over time that is detrimental to your health. It could be your relationship with your spouse or partner, right? It could be the inability to listen effectively to the expression of their challenges or needs or what they want, in which case, you know, most people listen for responding, not listen to understand. And so that's a behavior that holds you back in some way. It holds you back from being really connected with your spouse. And so those things creep in and you notice them when the friction of that behavior becomes something that in some way, you know, is counterproductive to you. And so the challenge with that is by the time you notice it, it's gotten to a point where you just don't grin and bear it or bite down on the leather and change it. It takes some effort. And that effort is what I talk about in the book.
And you begin the book, the first chapter talks about understanding really like the science of how your body works. And to understand that, you got to understand your hormones. And you have hormones in your body that are basically designed to keep you alive, some to keep you
Correct.
interesting, and some to make you do things.
Yeah.
What is the most powerful or misunderstood of those hormones, would you say?
Well, there's a lot of conversation about dopamine, and there's a great book called Dopamine Nation by Dr. Anna Lemke, who is sort of the godmother of this conversation, and I reference her in the book as well. Most people think dopamine is the reward hormone. It's actually the hormone of motivation and pursuit. And one of the things we, I think, misunderstand about our brain and how that hormone works is our brains are designed to strive and to pursue, right? We're hunters. It's the reason our eyes are in the front of our head. We know that when we are chasing something, is when we are most motivated. And there's a lot of science around the science of addiction that tells to some of this in extreme cases. But most people think dopamine happens when I get the thing that I want. That's actually not true. It happens when I'm chasing the thing that I want. And so our goal in the change world is, how do I make the change goal that I have the thing that I'm chasing, right? Instead of staring at my negative behaviors, how do I build a goal that's motivating enough for me to pursue it? Because when I do that, my dopamine goes higher and I actually make progress towards that goal.
There's a lot of thought and research that's gone into how our dopamine is impacted by the way we use screens and
Oh, yeah.
digital
Yeah.
tools these days,
Yeah.
mainly in terms of things like the endless scroll that we have on social media, where you're
Yeah.
constantly looking for another dopa hit. Has that impacted our ability to change, do you think? Where do you
For
stand on
sure.
that?
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of research that's been done, particularly in the world of gambling, right? I mean, gambling is in fact the kind of perfect definition of this experience, which is, I know a reward is possible. I don't know if it's coming, but
One more hit,
this next one
one more
might be
pull at the
it, right?
slot.
Yeah. And so this next one might be it. And that's a great example of how dopamine works. It's the anticipation of that. So we could go down the rabbit hole of kind of the science behind what that does, but it is true that, this quick response stimulation that we get from the next reel or the next thing that we might read, that is the anticipation hormone at its best. And so we've got to sort of withdraw from some of that and find
Mhm.
other ways, because that behavior holds us back, right?
Obviously, when big companies bringing in, they want to affect change, but that typically impacts bottom line in terms of
Sure.
productivity. So for
Yeah.
the average person who might be listening to this while they're walking the dog or doing stuff around the house, driving home, it's probably something a little bit more personal. So could we maybe go over 3 or 4 recommendations for some of the more common things we look to change in our life and how you might approach that?
Yeah. We talked about one, and I think, it's January. A lot of people in my book, I talk about Quitter's Day. We've
Yep.
already passed it 11 days ago or whatever it is, where people give up on their New Year's resolutions. Exercise, nutrition, fitness, health is a goal that everybody has. One of the things that we talk about is redesigning your health goal. So most people start with that goal in like one of two ways. It's don't eat the donut, or it's I want to lose 30 pounds, right? The challenge with that is, when I say don't eat the donut, it's like, don't think about a pink elephant. All you do is
Hmm.
see the world full of donuts, right?
Or I'll go eat the cookie instead.
Right, right. And
Yeah.
so you start to focus on the negative behavior. And so that's sort of one challenge. The second challenge is, you don't lose 30 pounds in one workout. So what I say to people is, the first thing is rebuild your goal into what's called an approach goal. So instead of an avoidance goal, which is don't eat the donut, an approach goal is something like, I'm somebody who makes healthy choices. I desire to be someone who makes healthy choices. Then what I see are opportunities to make healthy choices consistently over time. Back to striving. When I see something I'm moving towards, I'm far more motivated than when I'm trying to avoid something that's holding me back. So that's the
It's
first goal.
interesting. So, from what's the science that backs that up?
Well, it's about the striving experience, right? And that there's some great studies that have been done on rats and mice where they've been withheld food for a couple days. Rats and mice eat a lot. And they put them in a maze, and as they get closer to where the food is, you'd think something without a lot of calories would be low on energy. They see massive spikes in dopamine as they get closer to the food through the maze. It's because that striving experience, and humans operate the same way. It's the same reason why, let's say you're going to go run a mile, 4 laps around the track. That first lap, you're like jamming, right? You're taking off. You're like, I got this. The second and third lap, oh my God, it's the worst experience ever. But when you get to the fourth lap and you make that last turn, you feel a sense of like, I'm almost done, right? And so if I can trick a little bit my brain to always being almost done by being someone who makes healthy choices, when's the next opportunity I get to make a healthy choice? That's a lot more motivating than don't eat that thing that I really want to have. Right.
It's fabulous. Okay.
There's another piece of this around tracking progress. So again, you don't lose 30 pounds in one workout. It's one of the reasons why people give up. It's like, oh my God, I got to do this again. Right. And one of the ways we talk about sustaining motivation is if you make effort the reward. So rather than making the finish line the reward, I make the effort I put into the pursuit of the finish line. So if I'm going to exercise, let's say my new goal is I'm going to exercise 3 days a week for 30 minutes. I'm not trying to lose 30 pounds. I'm just trying to build the habit of exercising 3 days a week. Every time I tick off that 30-minute interval, I get a hit of dopamine. I get a bit of success, which triggers serotonin and all these other things that I feel good about, right? And I'm more motivated to do the next one. So stop tracking the end goal and track the pursuit. And the more I do that, before you know it, you'll do it for week 1, week 2, maybe you miss a day. Okay, start over, right? But those are ways to rebuild a bit of a system for yourself. And sometimes we just track the wrong things.
That's really interesting because those are very subtle tweaks, really.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a, stepping on the scale for most people is a very demotivating experience, right? Because the net change on any given day is very small. But looking back at a 30-minute bit of exercise or a walk, and you go, I did that, right? It's incredibly motivating, right? And now you're someone who walks 30 minutes a day or exercises for 30 minutes a day. I don't have to wait until 5 months from now to meet my goal. I meet my goal in small ways every single day. That's how you rebuild a new habit. That's how you build a system for change in your life. And it can be applied to anything, really.
So we're looking at just recapping here. 1, figure out how you're approaching the goal and reframe the way you're going to state that goal. The second one being track your effort, not necessarily the end result. What would be another one?
So one of the things I talk about in the book, and this is probably, I would say, the one of the big leaps in science, in brain science, is there's this region of your brain called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. And it
Rolls
is
off the tongue.
Yeah. I've written it down a lot, so I guess it's ingrained in my own brain. And what has been found is that when we do intentionally hard and stressful things, that region of your brain gets bigger. Athletes, for example, have among the largest areas of this sort of brain region. And what it does is it incentivizes and creates a habit in yourself of doing hard things. And an extreme example would be somebody like David Goggins, right? Who's just torturing himself at every single moment and loves every bit of it. No one should go that far.
For people who don't know who David Goggins is, can you just real quickly explain?
David Goggins is a sort of, I would say, a health and fitness influencer, motivator, former Navy SEAL who's become kind of well known for extreme acts of fitness. And he's got a phrase, go hard. And it's just, he is all on all the time, every amount of torture and pain and extreme, stress possible. And he's made a name for himself because he used to be heavy and overweight, and he's transformed his life through doing hard things. And that's really a kind of an extreme example of what I'm describing. But this idea of doing something I don't want to do in the moment is, of course, very demotivating. It's very stressful. It's very hard. But it turns out it's one of the best things you can do for your brain. And so if I can, this is sort of the, this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you story of my own brain, right? Is that if I can get past the story I'm telling myself of how miserable this experience is, and understand that it's serving me in really important ways, then I'm more apt to do it, right? So an example I talk about in the book, it's very popular these days, right? Cold plunge. Cold plunge is a great example. If you've ever taken a 2-minute cold shower, and I'm talking cold, like it's cold
Yeah.
outside right now. I get up in the morning, it's like 32 degrees. The water's about 40 degrees. It is among the most miserable 2 minutes of your life. And it feels like it takes forever. There's a part in the book I talk about time and our time perception of difficult things, right? Fun times go really quick. Hard times seem like they take forever. But what it does is it actually resets your tolerance for stress and your ability to do hard things in ways that serve you to go accomplish your goals. And so what I tell people is if you want to accomplish your goals, rebuild your relationship with stress. It's probably the most important thing you've got to be ready for in this journey.
You and I share something in common that we both coached kids. And as I've coached kids in cross country and track, I've told them you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah,
And that I think is true for life in general because you
absolutely.
can get through anything.
Yeah,
You just don't want to at that moment, but you
absolutely. And
can.
yeah. I mean, you can and you do, right? And let me just be clear and put the right disclaimer out that long-term stress and stress of the traumatic sustained version, that's not what we're talking about. And people
No.
who are in that situation, of course, need to get the kind of help that they need. And that's a different animal. What I'm describing is sort of, short-term stress. And there's a part in the book we talk about the biologic function of stress and why it exists. It is an enduring human experience. And as a coach to athletes, I say this all the time. I say it to my son. The only way you get better is by playing people better than you. Do you want to know what happens when you play someone better
Say
than
that
you?
again. Say that again. I love that.
Yeah. The only way to get better is to play people better than you. And when that happens, what usually is the outcome? I usually lose, right? And so when I lose, I have to figure out, why did I lose? What could I have done differently? How do I train a different part of my body or my skill set in the off time before the next competition? And that is very analogous to what errors provide for us in the change experience. And I talk about this in the book. Learning over the age of 25 is very different than learning under the age of 25. And most people have this wrong. We talk about rewiring the brain, and that's not exactly the right phrase. It's actually repurposing the brain. So over the age of 25, we don't really make new neurons. We don't really create any new brain cells. So I have to reuse the ones that I already have that have been dedicated to something else. I have to unlearn something and apply a new behavior there. And that's the part for us that's very stressful and uncomfortable. It's inefficient. You talked about it, low productivity. This happens in companies. I'm not going to be good at something, right? By definition. And the cheesy example I always give is try brushing your teeth for 2 weeks with your opposite hand.
I've done this.
Yeah, it's the most frustrating
Yes.
thing in the world, right? And so when we start to magnify that to other behaviors that are very salient in our life, well, now it's like I'm just going to give up. That's too hard. It's not working, right? The truth is, it is working, right? Errors trigger the opportunity for neuroplasticity in the most sort of impactful way. And so if you're not making mistakes, you're not growing. It's just that simple.
Isn't it a shame that we lose that thing you have as a kid, like where you get to try something new? You're
Yeah.
so excited, like all the different sports that kids go into, and they just can't wait to get there. And that is not only something we don't do as adults, it's kind of horrifying to even think about to most
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. And particularly in my work with companies and executives, the higher you go, the more difficult it is to be vulnerable. And the higher you go, the more we perceive the magnitude of of our errors, right? And so missing a quarter, missing a half year, missing a full year's numbers, those are impactful things, right? And so that becomes a conversation of how our brain works in terms of fear and the predictions we make. And there's a great section in the book about the work of Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, who is just
Mhm.
rebuilt our understanding of even how our emotions work. And so I always tell people, and I try to live this way myself, on the other side of your fear is a person who you don't yet know but can't wait to meet. And if you can remove from yourself to the greatest extent possible the unwillingness to make mistakes, you'll find your life just takes off in incredible ways.
I am very obsessed with all things aging these days for
Okay. Yeah.
obvious reasons.
Same. Yeah. Yeah. Clock's
It
ticking.
strikes me that change might be a key to aging well, like embracing
It
change,
it
new
absolutely
things.
is. Yeah. And I think it's sort of interesting. I also a bit of a student of longevity, and I do a lot of stuff. And, this, first of all, the science is clear that exercise and stress induced through exercise is the single best thing you can do to live a longer, healthier, happier life. So let's just take that off the table. But the idea of staying engaged, keeping your mind sharp, and it works in both directions. And we know that exercise triggers the brain that, hey, I need to keep moving. So let's keep firing those things. And working your brain in uncomfortable ways triggers the body to release the hormones that we need to keep us motivated and keep going. So, the idea of retiring at 65, in some ways, I'm 51 and I'm like, I feel like I'm just starting. But why would I stop at 65? Like, what would I do? And we see a lot of examples of people that retire, they become unengaged in the world, and there's real negative health effects. And so changes that you should change up until the day they close the casket. That'd be the best recommendation I can make to people.
I'm seeing some sort of like collab with the funeral home now. All right. So you worked in corporate America, did the consulting thing for many years. But
Yeah.
speaking of change, about a year and a half ago, you kind of blew things up. Talk
Yeah.
about how you did that, what you're doing these days, and why it has been at 51 like this incredibly exciting time for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's, some things happen by choice. Sometimes they happen through serendipity, and sometimes it's big explosive moments. I'd been in big consulting. I'd always been a bit of a troublemaker, a maverick, pushing boundaries. I've kind of always been that irritating little kid who asked why or why not, and can I push? Can I go? Why can't we do this? And
We are like seriously the same person
yeah.
with the same books on the bookshelf, I might add.
Yeah. No, it's but I realized that in some ways inside of bigger companies that behavior didn't always serve me because big companies have systems, they have processes. And so I was always searching for, I think, a version of myself in those places that I couldn't really achieve. And so I joined a smaller company thinking that I'd have more freedom and flexibility, and I did. But that company kind of hit some hard times, and a bunch of people that they hired to kind of take us forward, they said, hey, look, this isn't going the way we want. And I just saw it as an opportunity. And I had some clients that appreciated the way that I worked and the way that I showed up. And thanks to my wife, she said, this is the time to build the thing you've always wanted to build. And so I knew that to help people change and to really help companies change, I needed to really blow it up myself and start to live the behaviors that I was expecting others. And so it just became a natural inflection point for me. And as I described in 2023, I got married in March. I turned 50 in May. We found out my wife was expecting in August. My mom had a massive heart attack and almost died in September. We found out 3 weeks later she had stage 4 lung cancer. She's still alive. A month later, I started my own company. January 2024, I started writing my book. My daughter was born in May of 2024. My book was just released, and you stack all that up, and it's been the best 18 months of my life. And I feel like I'm just getting started. It's really, really incredible. And I never would have thought at 50, 50, 51, I'd be going all in. And it's just been great.
That's amazing. Well, congrats on all of it. I mean, except for your
Thanks.
mother not being well, obviously.
She's good
But I mean,
now. She's a trooper.
that is so much change that it's exciting, you know?
Well, and I think I say to people, and this is going to sound a little maybe cliched, but it is really true. I'm a coach. That's how I think about myself. Like you, I coach athletes, I coach leaders, I coach executives. And as a coach, I think I have three obligations. And, the first is to help people into uncomfortable but necessary experiences and conversations, back to why change is hard. The second is to help them through that, to give them tools. And it's why I wrote the book. And the third is to lead by example and to live those same behaviors. And, I tell people I'll never ask you to do something I haven't done or I'm not willing to do myself. And so it's become the motivation for me to keep going. And, I plan to make it to 100 and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon.
So leave us with a change challenge for people who are going along and thinking, I got it good. Things are going great. Sometimes that's the best time to start blowing things up and try something new. What's your challenge to us?
I think the challenge, it's such a great question. I think I would ask someone in your life that you trust and that you care about to be honest with you about a behavior that they see might be holding you back. And I want people to ask the question that way. Don't ask, what do I do that bugs you? Don't ask, what am I doing wrong? Ask people a question. What is a behavior that you think I'm doing that's holding me back? And I want you to really listen to the answer. And I want you to think about that behavior, where it comes from. And then I want you to ask them, if I changed that behavior, what do you think it might look like? And I want you to listen to that feedback. And then I want you to think about, how do I design a goal around pursuing that behavior? We talked about health and fitness. Maybe it's being a better listener. Maybe it's about spending more quality time with your kids. Maybe it's putting your phone away at a certain time, whatever it could be. And there's no behavior too small. But those two questions are really important. And in the book, I talk about these three questions that truthfully can change any part of your life. And I'll just share them here, because what I gave you as a kind of an insight was sort of derived from that. The first one is what's holding me back, right? And to understand, what is a behavior that I believe is something that's holding me back, or something that I've done in my life repeatedly. How did I do it? How did I show up? And really analyze that. And the second question is, how did that serve me? And that question is important because it's not about the outcome. It's about, what was the result in the experience that I had in ways that I didn't see? And then how might I do it differently? And those three questions, and you got to really answer them. And it sounds easier than it is. It's easy to ask a question. It's a lot harder to answer. I truly believe those three questions can change any part of your life if you're honest with yourself about the answers.
Do you know what's interesting? I have two teenage boys. And if they asked that question to me, which they never would, but if they did, I'd have an answer for them right away. Never thought about asking it about myself. I think that's fascinating to do as an adult. And the idea that if you don't keep moving and growing, you're really kind of dying.
And I think, you can't perceive yourself, right? That the same brain that got you into this behavior is not the same brain that'll get you out. So you need other brains to reflect back to you what they perceive. It doesn't mean they're exactly right, but there's information in there for you to use if you can really evaluate your behavior, and then get a coach and help you work through that, the practice of doing something new.
Well, congrats on the new book. The new book is Change: 6 Science-Backed Strategies to Transform Your Brain, Body, and Behavior. It is just coming out here at the end of January. Will be available everywhere, I assume.
It is out and ready to go, actually. So we are live. The book is live. You can go get it.
And where can people keep up with all the work that you're doing?
A great place to start is my website, michaeljlopez.coach. You can find all my socials there. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, Instagram. I just started to build, my YouTube page. I do a LinkedIn Top Voice series every week, and I've been posting those episodes there. So starting with the website is a great place.
Perfect. Michael, thank you very much.
Thank you, Deidre. This has been great.
I'm Deirdre Fitzpatrick, morning news anchor and host of Dying to Ask. My guest wrote the book, launched the product, won the race, or cracked the ultimate life hack to live bigger by living smarter.
This opened up a door, and things will never be the same again.
One thing I've learned is that you have to think it before you can do it. Join me for the podcast that pulls back the curtain on the people who turn big dreams into real life success.
Isn't that an awesome thing to be able to say about any career?
Subscribe to Dying to Ask wherever you listen to podcasts.